everybody for joining today's webinar, Breaking Barriers webinar on how women rise. Today's session is being recorded and a link will be shared with all of the attendees and will be available to members who weren't able to join today's call. My name is Corinne Eaton. I'm the Executive Director of Sign Association of Canada. Now that I have a bit of a captive audience, there are a few housekeeping remarks from me of events and as well as different programs that are available to our members, and I'll review them very briefly. So as a member, I keep saying that you're a member of a multidimensional association. So you're a member of your local chapter or region, you're a member of Sign Association of Canada, so the national umbrella head, and if you're a Class 1 member, meaning if you're a sign manufacturer, you are a member of ISA as well. So all those benefits and programs provided by these three levels of associations are available to you. First of all, and you can see it also in my background now, virtual night out at the Boxies. We hope that you will all be able to attend. It's on September the 25th, and we're going to be celebrating the best of the Canadian sign industry. It's a two-part event, so there are demos from 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern Time, and then there's the virtual gala itself, which starts at 7 p.m. I have seen the finalist works, and I have even taken a peek at the winners, and it's just astounding. So I hope you'll all be able to join. And to register, you see the URL link here, and we'll also share the URL link after the end of the presentation. Affiliate partners. So as a member, you get access to lots of different benefits, and we have affiliate partners. And so regardless of whether you're in BC or in Atlantic Canada, and there's a list of different member discounts, and we've heard from members that just by participating in one of these discount programs, you can make back the money that you're paying in membership dues. So do take a look and see what is appropriate for your company. Upcoming webinars and e-learning. Our association, along with ISA, has been doing number of 30 odd webinars, or more than 40 this year. So 2 upcoming events that I'd like you to know of. September 23rd, ISA is going to be or have a webinar on how to be a great boss. So successful companies have employees who are productive, engaged, and happy, but it all starts at the top. So this session is going to look at how to be the best boss you can be. So not only for your employees, but also for yourself and the future of your company. This webinar is on September 23rd, so next week at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, and you can register through the URL link indicated there. And the second one is not a webinar, but more so e-learning opportunity. This is one of the sessions that was just released by ISA in their e-learning library, and it's on film properties and understanding different film properties. And this is on demand, so whenever you have time, you or your employees can go and check it out. Sign Manufacturing Day. As you know, one of the biggest not problems, but things we're dealing with is, as an industry, is attracting young talent to our industry. And we've had, for many years now in a row, Sign Manufacturing Day. This year, the event is going to look slightly differently because it has to be on a virtual platform. It's going to be on October the 2nd. And however, ISA has prepared templates and suggestions on how you can do it virtually. And why it's important for sign companies to participate in it also this year is that we have heard from teachers, a lot of teachers have to teach virtually, and they are looking for great content. So maybe if there are schools that are not right in your vicinity and are a little further, but this might be the best year to connect to them, and so that the teachers can link in with your sign company and their students can get a better idea of what sign manufacturing is like. So, breaking barriers. Our breaking barriers session, so this one is 3rd in a row, are, thanks in part to our great task force, who meets on a monthly basis to discuss topics that we should bring forth to our audience. Our task force's mission is stated here. By creating a network through coaching, education, and mentorship, we inspire and empower women in their ever-changing roles in the Canadian sign and graphics industry. So, in the spirit of education and mentorship, and in the spirit of inspiring and empowering, we wanted to present this session to you on how women rise. Around the world, women leaders are being heralded for their approach on how to handle crises. The COVID-19 pandemic has put a spotlight on female leadership and our inherent ability to navigate challenges. So why are women still so underrepresented in the upper levels of organizations? In this session, Glyne Roberts-McCabe will share 3 ways that women unintentionally limit their influence and impact, and 3 ways they can strengthen their position. Glyne, pronounced like shine, Roberts-McCabe is the founder and president of The Roundtable, a company that helps leaders navigate change, disruption, and growth. The Roundtable is best known for their group and peer-based coaching and mentorship programs that help organizations galvanize culture and accelerate business performance, all while building leadership capability. In 2018, Glyne was named one of Canada's Women Entrepreneurs of the Year. Glyne is the author of 2 Amazon best-selling books, The Grassroots Leadership Revolution and Did I Really Sign Up for This? I've read both of them. I love them. So without further ado, I am giving the mic over to Glyne. Thank you, Glyne.
Thanks, Corinne. It's so great to be here, and especially talking about women and how we can, get the most out of our careers. So I'm just going to get my screen sharing here and set up. And while I'm doing that, I'm just wondering, Hillary, maybe if you could share that opening poll for me, because you guys heard a little bit about me. I'm curious to hear who's on the call with us today. Are you a new grad? Are you somebody who's an individual contributor in your organization with more than 3 years experience in place, so you're not a new grad? So just pop in so I can get a sense of who's on the call. And one of the things we're going to be talking about today is all of these things are timeless. It really doesn't matter. I'm going to share with you some stories from my own 25 plus year career where I still sort of step into some of these challenging areas. So it just gives me a bit of a sense of who's on the call. So it's looking like we've got a number of experienced managers, which is awesome. So those of you who are more experienced, I think you're going to find this super relevant for yourself, but I would encourage those of you in sort of the manager roles, and whether you're a new manager, seasoned, or you've got a lot under your belt, think about how you might also apply this in the coaching of your younger employees and the folks that are within your team. So see, those are coming in. I think we've almost got everybody voted. A few of you are holding off. Maybe you're something else. You can throw that in the chat if you'd like. Let's see if we can get a couple more in. I think that's good. Should we share the results? Hillary, I think we've got a good sense.
You bet.
Sounds good.
Sure.
All right. So you should be able to see there. So we've really got kind of the gamut here really is represented. So as we go through the presentation, if you've got specific questions based on, where you're sitting in your career right now, because, careers have an arc, feel free to throw them in the chat or in the Q&A. Hillary is very kindly going to be monitoring all of that for me so that we can, respond in real time. We'll also have some Q&A at the back end, assuming that I don't get too chatty. So, but feel free to throw it in as we go along. All right, we're good to go. So I'll just stop sharing those results, I think. Can I do that? Okay. So does everybody see my screen okay? Hillary, can you give me a thumbs up if my screen's up and running?
Yes, we're seeing you.
Perfect. Okay, beautiful. All right, so here we go, everybody. And I've got two screens going, so if you see me looking over here, it's not because I'm looking at my emails. I'm just checking to make sure I'm on track with where I need to be. So Corinne gave a nice intro about me. There's a couple things I'm going to bring up because I know Glyne never makes it onto the top baby names. So my reminder for all of you in terms of remembering how to say my name is think Glyne like shine, not Glane like rain. So Corinne was very nice to say Glyne like shine, not Glane like rain. So think sunshine, that's me. And yes, we've won a number of awards at the round table. One of the ones that I was particularly proud of was in 2016, we were named the best HR consultancy advisory in Canada, and that was based on input from our clients. So super proud about that. And I'm sharing these things with you, not because I want to just reinforce how great we are, but we're going to come back to this as we go through the presentation. I have written 2 books. Did I really sign up for this? Is all kind of the lessons of real-time learning about leadership. So those of you who are in early stage career, you might really enjoy that book. It's got chapters like my boss is a psychopath, I don't know what to do. So all kinds of really interesting things you can dive into. And then my second book. And then this is my family. It was taken a few years ago. They would both die. That's my husband and my daughter, who was at her grade 8 graduation then. I'm going to be circling back on them, but so I wanted you all to have a picture of as I'm talking about them, which they enjoy so much, let me tell you. I wanted you to know who I'm going to be talking about. So that's my husband, Darcy, and my daughter, Nia, in a very proud moment where we were all able to, like, you know, publicly socialize and go to graduations and things like that pre-COVID. So Corinne started us off talking about how, as women leaders, through this pandemic that we're in, the countries that are doing the best at navigating through this, with I think one exception, there is one female leader who is stumbling a little bit, but without exception, the countries that are headed by women are navigating through this pandemic much better than those headed by men. And as Corinne said in her opening, so if that's the case, why aren't we seeing more women at the forefront? And, you know, I'm with Lenny Kravitz, right? You know, guys have had their chance. Now it's our turn. Now it's our turn. And it's really our turn. I want to share with you some research that came out of Jack Zenger and his partner, and I'm going to forget his first name, Folkman, Zenger Folkman, did some research several years ago on the capabilities of men versus women in leadership. And they did a whole bunch of research into their 360 results. 360, for those of you unfamiliar with that, is when you survey a leader and look through the lens of their boss's perception, their peers' perception, their direct reports' perception, as well as that individual leader's perception of their capability. So what they did a number of years ago is they had dug into that to see what's the difference between men and women, and then they redid it in 2019. So they had a great article in HBR that really showcased, you know, what do men do better than women, and across these very key leadership behaviors, competencies, you know, things that we need to be demonstrating as leaders to be successful. There were things like setting stretch goals, displaying high integrity and honesty, developing others, inspiring and motivating, taking initiative, championing change, building relationships, resilience, right? You can read all of these. These were the things that were measured against. And guess what, ladies? Out of 19 measurements, we outscored men 17 out of 19. Statistically significantly, we outscored men 17 out of 19. So why are we not at the table? The 2 places that men outscored us, because I know you're curious about that, one was strategic capability and the other was technical capability. So sort of being that expertise, subject matter expert. So I have a theory. I think that, you know, as women, we believe our own inner critic a little too much. We are not leaning in heavily enough to what our strengths are, but it's also almost like a self-talk. I really am starting to think more and more about the fact that, you know, you create your own reality. And if you feel that you're not as capable, ready, whatever, it starts to get in the way. And so there's a lot of things that women do subconsciously. And so what we're going to talk about today is I'm going to share with you three kind of big areas. I see this over and over again in the coaching work that I do. So I coach a number of executives I've coached everywhere from entry-level leaders all the way up to most of the clients I work with now are CEO, SVP, VPs. And oh my goodness, I picked the top three areas that just come out repeatedly with my clients. We're going to share what those are, but then we're also going to share what we can do differently to really quell this, right? How do we head this off at the pass? And I have to admit to something right now. I have a 10-pound dog who never, ever, ever stays in this room, but she, for some reason, is in here right now and is demanding to be picked up. So I might have to pick her up at some point during this presentation. Okay, so let's talk about the three ways we unintentionally minimize our power as women. And I'm going to share with you some of my most embarrassing career stories. So I also want to kind of go that we're in a cone of silence here. And as I'm going through these, though, I want you to think about which ones you can really relate to, right? Whether for yourself or I don't know if we've got any gentlemen on the call, but maybe you see it with some of your female colleagues, coworkers, direct reports. But here's three ways that we give away our power as women. The first is the overvaluing of expertise. One of the interesting things that happens and you've probably heard this story said, that a man will see, out of 10 requirements on a resume or on a job posting, he will see that he's only, got maybe one or two things, but he'll think, I'm going to go for it anyway. Whereas as women, we have 9 big check marks beside the 10 things, and the one thing we don't have a check mark beside is the one thing we think we need to get more experience on or information about. Men have a much higher degree of confidence. There's research that shows in early stage career, let me clarify this. In an early stage career, men exhibit more confidence. They are more likely, especially under the age of 25, to go, yeah, I'll figure it out. I can do that. Between the ages of 25 and 40, and by 40, it kind of merges together. And then after 40, women actually gain more confidence. And by 60, men's confidence actually decreases and women's increases. Between the span of 25 and 60, men's confidence only increases by 8.9 percentage points. Women's increases by close to 30. But in the early stage of our career and early parts of our career, often we don't have the same level of confidence that men have, and that becomes a detriment. For me, I will tell you, I've always thought of myself as being a very confident person. I've always thought that, I can hold my own. And how this shows up, and this is how, and this sort of lack of confidence, and then therefore that lack of confidence is what leads us to say, well, maybe I need one more thing. Maybe I need to do one more thing. Maybe I need that course, that credential, that another year of experience. When I was in my late 20s, I joined a consulting firm and I was hired to be their first salesperson. I had never been in a sales role before. I'd always been on the training and development side of the business. And so I joined the firm to be a salesperson. And within a month, both of my bosses quit. I reported to a director who reported to a VP, and they both quit. And I thought, okay, what do I do now? And I really realized I'd been leading teams for many years before that. It had been a step out for me to go back into just an individual contributor role. So I decided, with encouragement, to throw my hat in the ring to head up this sales division. Anyway, I got the job, which is great. My boss took me out for lunch to tell me that I got the job and to give me a pay increase. And I can't believe I said this, but let me tell you what I said to him when he offered to give me a pay increase. I said, no, you don't need to do that. Let me prove myself first, because I've never actually led a sales team before. So once I've proven myself, then I'll take the pay increase. How crazy is that? A few months later, I discovered that I was grossly underpaid compared to my peers that I was in the same role with, who are both women. So it's not like I was underpaid compared to a man, but I was underpaid compared to my peers and I'd done it to myself. So we tend to want to prove ourselves. We tend to want to, demonstrate that we're ready for people's, approval or the opportunities. So that's one thing. Overvaluing expertise, which underneath that for me sits in terms of confidence, right? The confidence that we have to really lean in and take things on. The second, one of the great strengths, and I always say your greatest strength becomes your Achilles heel. One of the greatest strengths that we have as women is actually we're very relational, and we're very good at building relationships. It's actually one of the ways that we build trust. And so we build all these relationships, but we never leverage them. We never leverage them. And this really came to light for me when I was doing a program, and I'm going to introduce you all to my dog. Just one second, because she's literally driving me bananas. This is Bella. So hello, say hello, Bella. You can sit up here with me. So one of the things that happened to me, I was delivering a program for senior executive women on how to be successful and how to grow a really strong career. And we had a senior executive man come in and talk to us about the fact that there's a difference between mentorship and sponsorship. And we were talking about this idea of mentors. I hope you can't hear my dog sniffing. We were talking about this idea of mentors being kind of a plethora of mentors. Like you can always find a mentor, people will mentor you, but people do not necessarily sponsor you, right? Like sponsorship is different. Sponsorship is around, I'm going to put my neck out there because I really trust that you are going to do the work that you say you're going to do. And it's sort of my reputation is now being attached to you when I sponsor, versus mentoring is, I'm teaching you, I'm helping you, I'm supporting you, but I'm not necessarily attaching my reputation super closely to you. So that's a really interesting conversation. I thought it was really fascinating. And then one of the things he said was, because I asked him, I said, how many women have approached you to be their sponsor? Like, do you get approached to be a sponsor? And he said, you know what? No women have ever approached me, but plenty of men have approached me to be a sponsor. And I thought, isn't that interesting? We build all these relationships and yet we don't lean in to ask. And one of the things that will stop us, and this gentleman went on to say another thing that I found really interesting, because that morning I had been thinking about reaching out to a senior executive that I knew, because I was launching something new and I thought he would be a great supporter of it. And I held myself back because I hadn't talked to him in a couple of years, and I felt like it would be really kind of weird for me to just call him out of the blue and ask. Well, in this session that I'm then in that afternoon with this gentleman, he actually brought this up as an example. He said, like men will pick up the phone. I haven't talked to somebody for 5 or 10 years, and they'll pick up the phone and they'll ask for a favor. He said, women never do that. Wow. So our strength is that we build relationships. Our liability is that we almost overuse that strength, right? We think that if we haven't been maintaining these relationships and we haven't been cultivating these relationships, we can't leverage our relationships, right? We can't make an ask. We can't lean in and ask for help. So it's another really big one that we unintentionally give away power by not accessing people who can help us, people who can lean in and support us around particular projects and things that we're doing. All right, the next one, the last one in my deadly 3, playing small. So as Corinne mentioned to you, I wrote 2 books, and one of my most favorite people in the entire world is a gentleman named Marshall Goldsmith. Marshall Goldsmith wrote a book probably 20 years ago now called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. It looks at 21 behaviors that senior leaders demonstrate that get them into trouble. And I can remember when I read it, I had like 16 out of the 21 behaviors. Anyway, I love Marshall's work. He's really terrific. And a couple of years ago, I had the opportunity to be one of 50 people who was selected to work one-on-one with Marshall in New York City. And so I went down, and I had just released my book, my first book. did I really sign up for this? And I was working on my second book. And so the whole day we're there and Marshall's walking around, you know, there's 50 of us and he's super friendly and we're chatting, and a friend of mine had asked for a signed copy of one of his books. So I brought a book down and he was very kind, signed the book for, you know, my friend. And then at the very end of the day, I went up to Marshall and I said, Marshall, thank you so much for such a great, you know, session. I really appreciated it. And I have a book that I just wrote, and could I send you a copy? And he grabbed me by the forearm and he looked in my eyes and he said, Glyne, why don't I endorse it for you? I could endorse your book for you. And I said, oh my goodness, thank you so much. Oh my gosh. And then he looked at me in the eyes and he said, Glyne, do you think a man would have waited until the end of the day to tell me about his book? And do you think a man would have waited to be offered an endorsement? Don't you think it would have been the first thing a man would have asked for? But for me, I felt like, who am I to ask Marshall Goldsmith to support my quote unquote little book? Limiting, right? Little book, I wrote a book, but in my mind, it wasn't significant enough to ask Marshall, and he called me out on it, that playing small. This is one of the things we do as women. It's almost tied to the first thing. We minimize our expertise. One of the things women do all the time is have a very hard time choking on the word. We'll say our team, my team, we did this. A hard time saying, I did this. This is mine. This is how I contributed. So playing small and minimizing our expertise, what we actually do in that situation is we allow other people to judge us at a level that we should not be being judged at, right? So those are my big three. I am curious, and I know, Hillary, we have another poll to kind of hear what resonates for you about this. Which one of these, as you think about it, do you do and or have done? I've shared with you some of my horror stories. You know, are you really good at overvaluing expertise, feeling like you need one more course or one more thing before you do something? Do you build but not leverage those networks? Do you keep yourself small, minimize yourself? Is it all of the above? Like me, join me in the all of the above camp. And, you know, is it something else completely different for you? And if you're brave enough to put what that something else is, I would love to hear that. Throw that in the chat, and Hillary can kind of let us know what else is coming up, because there's many. And in fact, this talk, Marshall co-wrote a book with Anate, and I'm going to share with you the link or the book info at the end. But he co-wrote a book with a lady named Sally Helgeson it's called How Women Rise, actually, and it's 12 behaviors that really derail women specifically, seem to get in the way. And so if you do have something else that's on your radar, no surprise there, because there's a few. And if you're listening to this and you're of another gender, I would highly recommend Marshall's book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There, because it really does outline a number of behaviors that we all do as leaders, men or women, that will limit us. So take a look at that. And leaders are individuals. I keep saying leaders, but really, you know, I feel like we're all leaders in the work that we do. Okay, looks like we've got about 80% of the votes in. So why don't we share? All right, so all of the above has got the most votes. So everybody's sort of relating to that. We've got, then the rest are all tied, actually. It's like we've got a group that really overvalue expertise. Keep getting that. I have a colleague who does that. She always thinks she needs to have one more certification before she can do anything. And then, yeah, so any sort of additional comments or questions from this in the chat? Anybody got anything? Let's do a little chat talk. If you've got any questions that are coming up, feel free to throw them in the chat right now, and then we can sort of address that before we get into what to do to deal with all of this.
Glyne, I've got a question in the Q&A.
Yeah, great.
So it's from Folu at Science Spec. She asks, how do you navigate the line between being confident in your abilities / expertise and coming haughty?
Like sort of, how do you, like, as opposed to being like a bit of a know-it-all or arrogant or too full of yourself? Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, I think language is really a critical part of this, right? So the words we choose to use, how we say what we say, how we present ourselves. So what I would sort of suggest is most of the time, it's more that we're not demonstrating the confidence, right? So I would sort of start to work there first is, you know, using language to really demonstrate confidence. So I believe this, or this is what I recommend, as opposed to saying words like I think, which are minimizing type words. So I'd really think about what's the language you're using that demonstrates confidence. And then, I mean, haughtiness, arrogance, I find a lot of things around those behaviors is it's really in the eye of the beholder. So what comes across as arrogance to me may be completely fine for you. So a lot of what we have to always do in our careers and with the people we work with is we sort of want to be checking in all the time to see, how am I showing up and how's that landing on people? You know, am I showing up in a way that's positive, or am I demonstrating a behavior that is somehow rubbing people the wrong way? And so we're going to actually talk a little bit about how you get at some of those nuts in this next part, because self-insight is really going to be your biggest friend. And so rather than kind of giving you a prescriptive how not to be arrogant, because I don't know, like, you know, if you're in an environment where that's, you know, demonstrating confidence and being very forthcoming and all of that kind of stuff, you know, what haughty might look like is very different than an environment that's very collegial and collaborative, and we never ever say I in this company. So a lot of it's about fit and understanding how your style and approach fits with the organization you're in. But, you know, there's the obvious stuff of, like, you know, we can probably all think of a certain very well-known politician right now who comes across as arrogant because of the language. I'm the smartest person in the room. I know more than anybody. You know, like, I think if you're using that kind of thing, then, you know, you've probably crossed that bridge. But for most of us, it's more subtle than that, because it's really about the context within which we're working and the people we work with and what they perceive that to be. So we'll talk about how you can kind of unpack that. Any other questions, Hillary, coming in, or are we good to keep going?
I think we're good. There's nothing in Q&A or chat right now.
Okay, awesome. All right, so feel free to, as things are hitting you, just pop them into the chat and we will address them as we go. Okay, so here are my 3 favorite tips to really rise within your career. This is really, for me, about owning your career. I really truly believe that you have to be in partnership with your employer. If you're heading up an organization, you're in partnership with your board. It really is about this idea of shared success. What do you need and what do you want from your career, and what does the company need and what do they want from you? And so at a foundational level, it's really important that you're really grounded in a couple of key areas so that you can contribute to the organization the best you can, but also minimize you know, all these tricky spots that we just talked about. So the strategies I'm going to share come directly from my latest book, The Grassroots Leadership Revolution. So if you want to dig in deeper at any point, there are more exercises, and there's also online tools and things like that through the book website. So feel free to go there. But here's where we start, and this is where I start in all of our programs at the Roundtable with all of the executives I work with. It starts with values and knowing and understanding your values. If you know and you're grounded in what your values are, you are going to be in a much better position to be able to stand in confidence. You're going to be in a much better position to be able to know what kind of career path you want to go on and go down. And you're going to be really understanding, have much more clarity and understanding about where things kind of rub you the wrong way. So when it comes to values, here's what I want you to do. I want you to just think about a time in your life when you were really happy Like when things were going really well for you, think about a really specific situation that you were in where things were really, really great. It can be a small moment in time, could be a really big moment in time. For me personally, one of the most powerful moments of my life was when I gave birth to my daughter. And I did it naturally. I did it without drugs. I was really determined to do that. My mother had had 4 kids. She never had an epidural. I wanted to do that like her. I had an OB that told me that it was going to be impossible. And so when I did do it and my daughter was healthy and you know, happy, and I literally came out of that experience going, I am woman, hear me roar. Like you could not take me down after that experience. It was powerful. So let's unpack that for a second. What does that story, the fact that that is out of all the life I've lived, that is one of the stories that come to mind. And when I share that story, what were the things that I was sharing about that? I mean, certainly, I didn't really talk about, oh, the love I saw when I saw my daughter. I do love my daughter, obviously, you know, she's my daughter. But for me, it was the challenge. It was the competition. It was, could I do it? It was the endurance of getting through it and doing it. And if I look at my life, I'm an entrepreneur. You need to, you know, every day is a challenge. You're pushing yourself to go further and higher. When I look at jobs that I've held, it was very much about not necessarily competing with other people, but competing with myself to want to be the best, to create my department. I used to always say, I want to build the best department that everybody wants to join and be a part of. Competition is an achievement are very big values themes for me. So as you think about, you know, the aspects of your life that really bubble up for you, that's what I want you to start to unpack, because those are the things that really become critical as you go forward. If you have a struggle with it, if you're like, I'm not sure, there's nothing really coming for me, think of it in reverse. What's the stuff that drove you crazy? What are the things that when somebody at work does something, it just drives you crazy? Because what I always say, and whenever people come to me for coaching, I was talking to somebody last week who's really unhappy in her job. She loves her job. She says she loves her job, but she's so frustrated with her organization. When I listened to her talk through like what was frustrating her, one of the things that's really important for her is influence and being able to influence the agenda and being at the table and being involved. And she has been completely shut out of a system right now. And it is just making her crazy. Think about that. For myself, I had that experience where I worked for an organization where literally it was like being in a factory where you had to punch in at 8:30, you could not leave your desk till 5:30. It was an environment that was so restrictive and constrictive. I have an extreme, one of my other values, I actually bucket it, independence, autonomy, freedom, flexibility. It's huge for me. And I, for years, had wanted to be an entrepreneur. I had been afraid to take the leap. And when I left a company that I'd been working at for a long time to join this new company, honestly, that crushing of my independence, autonomy value was what forced me out the door. I could not stay there. It was untenable for me, right? So thinking about where you feel rubs, where it feels strong for you is really critical to identifying what your core values are and really is at the center of what makes you happy and what's going to be fulfilling for you. One of the things I say to people is, as you're doing this and as you're thinking about this exercise, be careful of what I call the shoulds. And, you know, in coaching, we have this thing, don't should all over yourself. I should do this, I should do that. Here's an example. You saw my family, husband, beautiful daughter, and me. When I was starting my business, my daughter was in grade 5, and she used to take a school bus home that would drop her off 10 minutes from my place. 15 minutes really, probably, if you weren't driving like a maniac, but 15 minutes from my place. Bus would drop her off at 4:20. I would, you know, mentally calculate that, you know, I needed to leave by 5 after 4 to get her on time. So it would be 4 o'clock, right? 4 o'clock, I should be walking to my car, getting in my car and driving over there. But what am I doing at 4 o'clock? I've got, oh, that email just came in. I can quickly respond to that. Because you always think that emails are going to take you 2 minutes when in fact they take you 10. Invariably, I was always late for my daughter when I would pick her up. Family is not one of my top core values. Achievement is one of my top core values. Doesn't mean I don't love my family, does not mean that my family is not important to me, but what it means by my behavior, because your values drive your behavior whether you recognize it or not. My behavior indicates the family is not one of my top values. How do I really know that? Because my husband, family is absolutely one of his top values. And when he had to go pick her up when he was working from home, do you know what time he left? 3:45. He was there half an hour and 5 or 10 minutes earlier than he needed to be. I personally could not fathom why that's even necessary. But anyway, family, there was no way he would ever be late with my daughter waiting at the, side of the parking lot for me to come get her. So as you think about your values, be careful that you're not trying to make something that's aspirational or something that you think you should do. Be really clear about what keeps showing up again and again. And really think about those core ones, those 3 or 4 that just show up in all aspects of your life. So values, really helpful for when we stand in the place, gives us confidence, also allows us to really stand in our expertise place because we know what's important to us, and it allows us to really be clear with other people about what our non-negotiables are and what we can contribute, right, in terms of work. So that's the first one. The second one is you really need to know your USP. My first, background was, I was supposed to be a creative director for an ad agency before I went on a completely different career path. USP, for those of you not familiar with marketing terms, unique selling proposition. What's your USP? What's your zone of genius, we like to call it. Often when we talk to people about their strengths, this is the problem in those of you early stage career. I think you've got to be, if you're between 20 and 30 right now, I would encourage you to try a whole bunch of things to figure out what your strengths really are. Because there is a difference between when you're good at something and when you're good at it and you love it. So for me, one of the things I'm very good at, I've got a high aesthetic need. So I could look at a bunch of PowerPoints and I can see where you've used the wrong font, when things aren't lining up. I can see typos really quickly. If I had to do that for a day job, I would probably poke needles in my eyes. I'm not even exaggerating. That would be horrendous. But am I good at it? Yeah, I'm actually probably pretty outstanding at it, right? And that's kind of the way our skills go. Like we have stuff that we're really not skilled at, that we don't care about. We've got stuff that we're capable at doing. And then we have those things that we're actually outstanding at, but we don't love it. And this is where, when we talk about managing our careers and really thinking about what is the expertise we want to hone so we can stand at that confidence place, we're really looking for that intersection between what our capability is, like we've got good, strong capability and we can keep getting better, and we've got the passion and energy to keep pushing forward with that. And so the way I think about figuring out what that strength is, what that zone of genius is I always think about every job that you have. So the job that you're sitting in right now, think of all the activities you do within that job as a piece of pie, different pieces of pie. And some you might really enjoy the taste of, and some are disgusting. Like I can tell you that pizza slice on my image with the olives, oh my God, gross. That's just gross to me. So what I would be doing in a job is trying to get rid of that pizza slice, because what I would be trying to do is look for my next opportunity or a way to expand my scope where I got to do less of that and more of something that I really enjoy. And each job that I had, especially through my 20s, was I wanted to try new pieces of pie. I wanted to try things that allowed me to expand my palette in terms of what I was interested in, and really hone what was delicious to me in terms of the job that I was doing. So a couple ways to define your strengths on a regular. Grab a journal, and at the end of every day, jot down the things you did during that day that really gave you energy, that made you feel strong, that you felt really good about. That if your boss could say, hey, what do you want more of? You would say, sign me up for this, right? That's one thing you can do. The other thing you can do is track the stuff that depleted your energy, that yes, you did it, but time was dragging. oh my gosh, it took, maybe you procrastinated instead of doing it. Over, if you do that for a few days, weeks, months, periodically reflect on it, you're going to gain a lot more clarity around what is important to you and what your strengths are, which then allows you to position those, own that expertise, share it with manager, if you're applying for a job, recruiters, whoever, so that you can have more of that, but also allows you to start to be really strategic about what do you choose to take on? What do you choose to delegate? Those of you in management roles, this is a really wonderful opportunity we have as managers to be able to actually be bringing people onto our teams that might have strengths in areas that we don't have strengths, and interests in areas that we don't have interests, right? So strengths and defining that zone of genius, as Gay Hendricks would say in his book, The Big Leap, and Marcus Buckingham has done a ton of work in this area of strengths. So get to know your strengths, because that then again anchors this confidence piece and allows you to own your expertise, don't play small, stand up, leverage your network for where your gaps are. And then finally, my third tip is really to build your community. We have this sense, and particularly, you've heard me talk a lot about leaders and leadership because that's the space I play in. And one of the myths within leadership is that you have to go it alone, right? Like it's this myth of the heroic leader. Today we are so interconnected, and we actually need to lean on each other so much. This individualistic notion really needs to get put to bed. And so one of the things I encourage everybody to do, no matter what stage of career you're at, is think about what's the community you're surrounding yourself with? Who are the people that you're getting energy from? Who are the people that are building your confidence? One of the things that will happen, I used to think confidence was something you had or you didn't. And one of the ways that I've really recognized that you can cultivate your confidence is with people who know you, who can give you that boost or that other perspective when you need it. So one of the activities you can do, and this comes from Brene Brown, who wrote a book called Dare to Lead. Highly recommend all of Brene Brown's work. And she talks about the square squad. So take an inch, 1 inch by 1 inch piece of paper, and write down the names of the people that are in your squad. It's small because those are the people, those are your ride or dies. Those are the people that are, in the worst moments are going to be the people that have your back. And I think in this day and age where we have lots of likes and LinkedIn and how many contacts do you have and how many, we're sort of losing the plot a bit in terms of managing your career and, having the support you need. What you need is probably 20 people that you can pick up the phone, and if something were to happen, you can go to those individuals. So thinking about how you're actively cultivating your community. And I really do feel like communities can serve different purposes for different parts of our lives, right? So one of the areas that we often have is social communities, but I want you to really think about what's my work community? Who's in my work squad? Like who is that square squad for me at work? And how can we support and leverage each other? So I wanted to give you some of the reading recommendations, and then we'll kind of do Q&A. So get your questions ready. Hit me with anything I've touched on you want me to go deeper in. Now is your chance. But here are some of my favorite books. How Women Rise by Sally Helgesen and Marshall Goldsmith. Great book for women. The accompanying book by Marshall, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. Both are fantastic for everybody. The Gifts of Imperfection by Brene Brown. It was one of her first books, and it's still my favorite of all of her books. Highly recommend reading that, especially if you're a people pleaser, which many of us are, and especially if you have that very strong inner critic voice, which many of us do. Soar with Your Strengths by Donald O. Clifton. He is the grandfather of strengths-based thinking. So you'll see people like Marshall Buckingham or Marcus Buckingham and Kurt Kaufman, and all of their books come later, but Soar with Your Strengths is the original, and I think it's one of the best. If you want to really dive deep into values, there's a new book that a friend of mine has just come out with called Black Sheep Values. That's all about understanding these core values. And then of course, if you want to build a community to support you, there's my book. So I'm going to do a shameless plug for that, because that talks about how to build a community and support each other. So Hillary, questions. What do people want me to kind of pause and dive into more of?
Oh,
Can I-
Corinne has her hand up.
I have questions. Others are writing questions. I always have questions. Thank you very much for your presentation. So while others are typing in, I wanted to ask you something.
Yeah.
You talked a lot about values, and something that resonated was that you said values drive your behavior. And so my question to you is, because defining your own values can be also a difficult exercise. So do you have kind of tips or tricks or some resources where we can go to that will help us hone in on our values and that are not aspirational, but are really the true values?
Yeah, I mean, I think values is something that you want to sort of start and then keep going back to, because you want to sort of keep, you know, calibrating. And sometimes what people will say to me about their values is, well, I'm this way at work, but I'm this way at home. And I would say, okay, you might be. Those are situational values. But what's really critical for all of us to define for ourselves is our core values, because our core values are what we really lean into when we have to make hard decisions. And every senior executive I've ever worked with, when they've had to make a really tough call, like laying off people, closing plants, doing really, really difficult leadership decisions, without exception, that when I've said to them, how do you make those tough calls? Like, how do you get through that? They all say, well, I lean on my values. Like, I come back to my values. Your values is your internal compass. So there's a free online assessment. It's through Barrett. It's the Barrett Values Index, and it's BARRETT. Which I think we could probably find and send the link out to everybody following. But that's a great free way, and free as opposed to freeway, highway, free way for you to start to hone it down if this is really tough. But I personally like journaling. So, you know, thinking about, you know, those peak experiences you've had in your life. Think about your favorite movie. Think about your favorite book. There's reasons those things are favorite for you. Right? And then what you do is you're kind of like a forensic reporter. You start going, what's the commonality there? And then think about like that independence value for me. When I look at that, I can go, yeah, I was the oldest of 4. I was the only girl, never had to share a room. My parents raised us to be independent. Like that was their mantra. No wonder I have a core value around independence, which also makes it fun being married, where you have to compromise and, you know, deal with other things. And that's where the push-pull exists in different relationships, right? So does that help?
Yeah, no, great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And in the Q&A, we have a couple of questions teed up. So the first one is, tip on how to succeed as a woman leader in a family business setting.
Oh boy, I have like a million more questions for you about like, why is the family business piece an issue? I mean, I worked in a family business, though I would have had my wrist slapped from saying I was working in a family business, where at one point I reported to the owner of the company, his wife reported to me, and his daughter was my intern. So, you know, it was very much this way. I think my own experience, I don't know if this will help, but I would say when it comes to working within a family business, what you have to remember is it is like the baby, and you know, it's personal. Like, you know, we say business is business, and it's personal. So my advice, if I was giving advice, would be understand what is the priority for that owner. What is important to them? What are their values? What do they really value? And then how do you sell yourself to their values? One of the things that we do when we're trying to persuade other people or influence other people is that we will sell from what's important to us, what we think is important. And so one of the ways you can think about values in a context like this is to think, what is important to this owner, or what is important to these family members, and how do I convince or persuade in that environment? So I don't know if that helps, or if there's any sort of, if you two have other perspective on that. But that's what I would say. You can't change somebody else. You got to change yourself. And so to change yourself, you've got to look at what's the context I'm trying to influence or persuade in. Does that make sense?
Excellent. Yeah. Next question is, how do you translate your core skills and values into career options without relying on overvaluing expertise?
Can you say that again?
How do you translate your core skills and values into career options without relying on overvaluing expertise?
Yeah, I mean, so I think inventorying what you've accomplished is a really key thing for this. So often what we do, so picture a horizon, a career horizon, and we're all standing in the point and we're looking far ahead of where we want to go with our career. I mean, if we were standing, walking towards the horizon, you never reach the horizon, right? It keeps moving. So you keep moving forward. That's what our careers are like. We keep moving it forward because once we get somewhere, and what we don't do, we're terrible at doing this, is we forget to look back and see where we've come from, right? Where did we start and where are we now? And so one of the things I get people to do all the time to really own their expertise and to see that they've got a lot of expertise is to list that. List all the accomplishments, list what you've overcome, list all the things that you've put in place so that you can stand in that space and really decide what is it that I need to do next. The other thing too is I just say as women, we have to take more risk. Like we just have to lean in and recognize, go back to those 17 out of 19 leadership competencies we kick men's butts on. Like, we got to stop the self-talk that we're not ready yet. We are ready. You will figure it out. You will figure it out.
Excellent. And we have 2 questions and 3 minutes, so I will talk fast. Glyne, how do you suggest we can best support team members to feel empowered, especially in an industry where men tend to be in leadership positions as status quo?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is where sponsorship can really come into play. I think there's a lot of unconscious bias that exists around women and their capability, right? Because if we haven't seen it work, we don't know that it will work. And so I think this idea of if I was a woman in a very male-dominated environment, I would really go and target somebody to be my sponsor. Help me get ahead. Right? I would absolutely do that as a thing and ask until somebody agrees to do that. Because the way men build trust, women and men build trust differently. Women build trust by getting relationship and rapport. Men build trust by seeing you in action. And that's why men have had an advantage in workplaces, because they played on the hockey team with the boss, they've gone out and golfed with the boss, they can go out for beers with the boss. And in those situations where they're getting to demonstrate are things like communication skills and team building and all of those kinds of things. Women, we need to find opportunities to demonstrate our capability. So I would just be really proactive about cultivating that. And if you are a leader in the organization, how are you opening up those opportunities? How are you making sure that men have a view of all of the talent in the organization, right?
Excellent. The next question is, how do you avoid compromising your values when you absolutely need to work with a business associate that has values/ethics diametrically opposed to your own?
Oh, that's the $1 million question. I mean, sometimes I think that's where the rub is real, right? And a lot of that is acknowledging that they come at things from a different place than you do. Once you become conscious of that, then you can decide what's your non-negotiable in the relationship and have that conversation with them. Or sometimes it's like, I can tell you, like, I'm married, right? And anybody who's married, if you've got perfect values with your husband, you are the luckiest person in the planet. Like, sometimes I just have to say, that's how he's approaching it, and that's okay, right? So it's picking your battles, knowing the other person isn't necessarily going to change. So how can you change your response to that? And what can you do to sort of, I find awareness is 90% of it, and just adjusting our own reactions. So hope that helps. but it's a tough one.
We did get another question, and I think it'll be a great one to end on. It is, how can women leaders best support each other as we rise into higher leadership positions?
Oh my goodness, that's so important. And I think what women can do is broker those relationships. If you're in a position of power as a woman, you have a responsibility to do this, to profile women. You know, simple things like, this is going to sound crazy, but if, you know, depending on the size of your organization, but if you're posting for jobs and you only get, you know, you get 5 male applicants and 1 female applicant, go out until you have 5 female applicants to be able to compare. Make things balanced. Make sure that you're representing that you're open to all genders and diversity. Like, it's not just, you know, there's a lot of diversity opportunities for organizations generally, not just women, but women of color, disability levels, all of that type of thing. So I think we have to be super conscious about it. And if you're in a position of power, you need to almost set yourself some goals and metrics. I'm going to have 50% of my team be female or be diverse or whatever it is, and give yourself a clear date. We know that works. And this is not, for those of you that are going, yeah, but it should be about the best person. No, there's too much systemic bias within the system that we have to acknowledge that, right? There's a lot of systemic bias. So as leaders, we have a responsibility to unpack that, and then to figure out what are the metrics we need. And if we're not attracting those candidates, or we're not kind of seeing people get pushed up, what's the problem in the system that's preventing that? So not an easy solution, but that's what we got to be doing. That's the hard work.
Amazing.
All right.
Those are all the questions.
Yeah. Well, Glyne, thank you so much for your time today, for doing the presentation. We really enjoyed it. And we will send out to everyone the recommendations that Glyne provided us with in our follow-up email. One thing that we wanted, right now, as the breaking barriers voice, because I'm the only one who can talk right now, I wanted to say that as part of our follow-up email, we're also going to send out a link, and it's just to a survey. And our Breaking Barriers Task Force is looking at whether it is going to be a white paper or whether it's going to be a number of other webinars that we're going to host. And this is going to talk about women in the workforce. So we are looking for some data. We're looking for some input. So please do take 3 to 5 minutes to respond to our survey, because it's going to be highly, highly helpful to us to ensure that we are meeting the needs and we are providing you with the information that you're looking for. So again, thank you very much, Glyne, for your time. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you again. Have a great
Thanks, everybody.